Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about militia logistics, okay? And logistics is basically just getting, people, equipment, supplies, where you need them, when you need them, okay? So the scenario here, for those of you that are new to the channel, is that it's the mid-1980s and the United States has been invaded by the Soviets and the Cubans. They're occupying half the United States. And we have a bunch of teenagers caught behind enemy lines that have formed a militia to fight the communists. Okay, so of course I'm talking about the movie Red Dawn. I did a couple of videos on this. I believe this is the 11th one to date, and I've also created a playlist. Okay, I'm going to put a link below in the description in the comment section. If you click on it, you'll be able to see all the videos I've done related to this subject of the Red Dawn militia. Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about militia logistics. Okay, and there's three components: information, security, supplies. Okay, and these three aspects are really interlinked. If any one of these three things becomes compromised, then the entire militia is at risk. Okay, so let's talk about the first one: information. Okay, we need current and timely information. We need it to be able to to plan future operations, but we also need it for the purpose of these other two things. Okay, so we can provide for immediate security for our militia, and also in order to be able to scout out possible supply sources and to protect our supply sources. Okay, so information is going to become really important. Security. We need to be able to protect both the information lines, the supply lines, the current militia fighters, and basically what this is going to involve is setting up a network of safe houses. In the movie Red Dawn, essentially they had the militia fighters living in the woods under a tree. In reality, that will not be possible for a very long period of time. Okay. Most parts of the United States, they go through some pretty drastic weather changes. You get really cold winters. You get really wet falls and springs, and even in the summertime, it's really hard to live outside in the dirt for a very long period of time. I mean, you can do it for a couple of days if you're on a mission, but what's going to happen is if you're just sleeping on the dirt, you're going to get ticks all over your body that are just going to start sucking the blood out of you. And if those ticks aren't removed, within a day or two, you're going to catch an infection, right? You're going to catch Lyme disease. Our militia team is going to be rendered ineffective. So we need, permanent shelters. Now, of course, we're not going to be always staying at the same one, but we need a network of shelters that we can. That we can use as bases. Even during the American Revolution, okay, when George Washington was staying at Valley Forge, when you look at historical artwork, it looks like his soldiers are living around a campfire. Okay, but in reality, George Washington had hundreds of log cabins built so that his soldiers could basically live throughout the winter. Okay, so we need real shelters that's going to shelter us from the rain. That's going to be really important, because if we get soaked, we're gonna catch a cold, and if we don't take care of it, that's going to turn into a pneumonia. Without antibiotics, pneumonia probably has about a 50% chance of killing you. Okay, people take pneumonia for granted these days because we all have access to antibiotics. If you get a severe cold, you go and you see the doctor, so it never really progresses. It doesn't, usually doesn't progress to a pneumonia, but severe colds, if they're not treated, that's what they become. They become pneumonia, and there's a good chance that you will die if you are not treated. Okay. The other thing is supplies. Supplies are really important. Normally, when people think of supplies with relation to a militia, they're just thinking about ammunition, but in reality, ammunition is one of those things that, yes, you need it, but you're going to spend a really small amount of time actually fighting. Okay, you're realistically speaking, there might be one attack per month, maybe one every 2 months, because if you're attacking the Soviets on a regular basis every day, they're gonna, they're gonna catch you. So we're using the element of surprise to attack the Soviets, which means we cannot do it often. Okay, so so we're looking at one attack a month. But during that time, we need to eat. Okay, people need to eat at least twice a day, preferably 3 times a day. If the militia team is not properly fed, if they're underfed, morale's going to start breaking down. The militia is going to become ineffective. Okay, so food is a real concern. Also, with food is something that that it spoils. Okay, so even if you let's say you attack a supply line, you get some food, great, you got a whole truck, but without refrigeration, I mean, there's only so much that there's only so long you can hold those supplies for before they start spoiling, which means that we need to continually resupply ourselves. Initially we might be getting some help from from people that are not militia fighters. Eventually, as it goes, as this fight goes on, those people who are helping us may become compromised. So we're going to have to develop our own, supply sources. Okay, so but that's one thing to consider. We need a constant, regular supply of food. We're also going to need some clothes because, like I said, once the clothes get wet, if you don't get out of them, if you don't get into some dry clothes, you will get sick. Okay, and again, that's going to cause problems. So those are the things that we're concerned about. We need fresh, current information. We need to be able to provide security for our team, for our information lines, for our supply lines. We need to be able to provide security. We need to be able to supply both our militia team and the people that are providing us information. So all this really works together. Okay, so this is something that we're going to be spending a whole lot of time thinking about in a real Red Dawn type of situation. Okay, now what I want to look at over here is disrupting Soviet logistics, because the Soviets have the same needs that we have. They got a lot more people, which means they need a lot more food. Okay, they also probably have a lot of equipment that relies on fuel. Okay, so that's that's also something that we can attack. Fuel tends to be very flammable, so that kind of makes it easy to easier, not easy, but easier to attack. The other thing that we can do as far as disrupting the Soviet logistics is consider the fact that they're going to have a lot of civilian collaborators. We can expect that in a Red Dawn type of invasion, right, where the Soviets are occupying the United States for a prolonged period of time, you're going to start seeing an entire economy develop around that invasion. And if we look at France during World War II, when they were occupied by the Germans, that's exactly what you saw. Basically, half of France pretty much collaborated with the Germans. So, with regards to disrupting Soviet logistics, we want to attack these 3 things, and we have to consider the reality that that, for example, the food trucks and the fuel trucks will very likely be driven by civilian collaborators, basically our countrymen. So here's the thing that we kind of have to come to terms with. If we're going to be fighting the Soviets, we're also going to be fighting all the collaborators as well. Okay, so that is something we just got to come to terms with. If we're not comfortable with that, we probably don't belong on this militia team. Okay, so that's just the reality. Let me take this a step further and go back into history. Let's look at George Washington at Valley Forge. Okay, Valley Forge, New Jersey, in 1777. Okay, like I said earlier, he had a bunch of log cabins set up over there for his his soldiers to spend the winter. Okay, and what he did is he ordered the systematic removal of supplies in the area accessible to the British. Okay, so he basically authorized foraging. He told his soldiers to go out, to go to the countryside and take what they needed, and basically anything they couldn't take, they were to destroy it so the British could not take it. Okay, and one of the benefits of this is, aside from being able to gather some of the supplies that they needed, it kept the British out, because the British armies in general at that time lived off the land. So, if the British were to try and pursue George Washington's army, they had to, especially through the wintertime, they could not just rely on supplies that they were bringing with them. They also had to rely on supplies that were in the land. And by George Washington destroying those supplies, it made it, less inviting to the British. Now, this is what the history book says. Okay, he ordered the systematic removal of supplies in areas accessible to the British. Let's take a second and read between the lines. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, he told his soldiers to go out, and take what they needed. From where? Okay, to the farms. Okay, to the civilian farms. At that time, they, most of the farms were family owned. So he went to these farms, and basically they took livestock, they took crops, and whatever they couldn't take, they destroyed. Okay, as you can imagine, that caused a lot of damage to the civilian population in this area of New Jersey. Okay, we can imagine that when George Washington's soldiers showed up to take whatever they needed, that the farmers, in many cases, were not cooperative. Okay, and we can kind of guess what happened to those guys. Okay, that was left out of the history books. There's probably a lot of civilians in New Jersey that probably died as a result of this. Okay, that's kind of left out of the history books. But pretty much, George Washington was successful in keeping the British out. He was successful in keeping his army together, and that's just the reality of war. So this is a really a really complex subject. I just kind of wanted to to introduce it to you guys. In the future, I might do a more detailed video on this. This is, I believe, the 11th video I've done on this. But in reality, we would be spending, a militia would be spending about 99% of its time thinking about these things, and maybe 1% of its time actually fighting the Soviets. So, if you guys have any other ideas, something that you'd like to suggest, please put it in the comment section, and I will put a link to a playlist that has all these videos, so in case you've missed anything, you can look at them. If you guys are not a member of the channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button so you get the notifications. I'll talk to you guys soon.